Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a
Yeah, JR he's the only one on the team that has the ultra green light.
J.R. Smith was suspended for last night's game because he threw a bowl of soup at an assistant coach.
Just wait for the last shot of the game.
What was he doing?
I don't know. He wasn't thinking.
Hill misses. Rebound goes to the Cavs. J.R. Smith brings it back out. He didn't know the score.
Bad mistake by
J.R. For the structure and the backbone that I had, I wouldn't be able to mess up and keep coming back and being able to sit in front of you as the world champion.
Where do you start with a guy like J.R. Smith? A name more infamous with his off-court play than on, while being one of the most gifted scorers of his era. He's easy to remember for the memes, the championship teams, the 40-foot bombs, the posters, and the memories that he left behind. But beyond the surface, J.R. Smith is one of the oddest cases in NBA history, with play that looks like he was ready to take over a team one day, to play worthy of being off the team the next. JR was the wildest of wild cards on the court. He could certainly do anything at any minute, leaving you able to do anything but look away. But off the court, he could certainly be a whole new beast, with controversy ranging from goofy to downright dark. Let's relive the curious case of J.R. Smith. Growing up in Lakewood, New Jersey, it was far from the fast-paced lifestyle that he would be known for. Blue-collar dad supporting the family in a town largely connected by sports, it was about as normal as they come. JR was pretty connected to the sports culture that they were known for, and he stunk it up so bad in school that he just threw all his eggs in one basket, spending all of his time primarily on the football field or on the basketball court. And as an undersized kid, he was pretty boxed into the role of a traditional point guard, a dribble drive pass first guy, which was decent for him. He was quicker than most guys, but a 6-inch growth spurt shooting up over 6'4" to start high school flipped his game entirely. Now on the wing at Lakewood High School, the chains were off. He may have been a pretty good point guard, but now in the role as a go-to bucket getter, he was one of the best in that role in the entire country. Kid could pull it from anywhere, and with a great follow-through and all the confidence of the world, he could flip a switch and go out for 40 at any point. This was obviously a must-see show, and for the next 2 years, there wasn't an empty seat in the entire gym. As a kid who happened to be one of the best scorers in the country, he was still just a kid who was playing because he loved the sport, while still being one of the better wideouts in New Jersey. But as the recruitment wave came crashing in, JR decided to increase his stock, bouncing from Lakewood High School to St. Benedict Prep, where his game and talent continued to blossom, putting up 27, 6, and 5 over the next 2 years, standing at 6'6" and number 8 in the country. Outside of Dwight Howard, JR was the most gifted athletically from the class, a guy who could shoot the shit out of the ball, then jump 40 inches off the ground and throw down a tomahawk. He was quite the unique scoring talent, with offers from pretty much everywhere. JR had the world in his hands, and committed to the University of North Carolina before his dad would start getting ill and unable to work. As a sole provider in his whole family, they were pretty much financially ruined. This fueled the decision after taking home an All-American MVP to decommit from school and take his talent to the big leagues straight out of high school. You knew what you were getting with JR, and that was strictly buckets. The guy could shoot the ball and he could handle it a little bit. He could cut and finish with his chest at the rim. The dude was a pure bucket getter. I mean, the attraction to his game is pretty obvious. Shoot good, jump high. But that was literally it when it came to what he brought to the table. Despite being a pretty strong 2 with average height, who should have easily kept up with anyone in high school, his defensive reputation was kinda brutal. Falling asleep off of the ball, gambling on 70-30 balls not in his favor, bad screen and roll defense, and a lack of effort keeping a guy in front of him. I mean, didn't have a high IQ defensively, and as a scorer, he kind of negated other parts of his game. His IQ on the other end was definitely not great either. Non-willing passer, some of the craziest shot selections you'll ever see, and a lack of focus were some of the not-so-great qualities in his game. Despite this, he was still projected mid-first round and landed 18th overall to the New Orleans Hornets. Honestly, This is a pretty good place for a guy to JR to be. After a 41-41 season, the Hornets would move on from their stars in Jamal Mashburn and Baron Davis after injury issues arose. For this reason, this team was pretty sucktacular and in major need of talent. With a million shots to go around, it's probably a good place for a guy like JR to tune up his game to the NBA level. Unfortunately, this was very far from the picture-perfect scenario for a multitude of reasons. The Hornets coaching system, with Byron Scott in particular, prioritized experience and leadership over youth and potential. That was literally the opposite of J.R. Smith. Byron pretty much verbally violated him, throwing every insult in the book at him as his welcome to the NBA moments. What he took as some disrespect towards him, mixed with a lack of playing time, he kind of rebelled against the team. As an 18-year-old celebrity who can drive what he wants and live where he wants to, you couldn't really tell him anything. As he continued his bad shot and no defense antics through his rookie and sophomore campaigns, eventually ending in JR landing out of the Hornets rotation at the end of his sophomore season. He may not have been the best player in the world these 2 years, with an inefficient 10-2 as a rookie, then 8-2 on greatly improved three-point shooting. It's hard to imagine a world where you don't give your first-round picks some more attention when you're an 18-64 team. Despite the major pickups for the Hornets giving Chris Paul and David West keys to the team, and leaving a major need for wing scoring and shooting in particular, the Hornets were quick to package JR, eventually landing Tyson Chandler. When looking at the talent on the floor, there's a few things that stand out. With Carmelo entering his prime and Allen Iverson still holding on to his, the scoring talent was actually insane on this team. Marcus Camby filled up the paint as one of the best defenders in the NBA at this time, and Andre Miller was an underrated facilitator when he was out there despite fighting off injury issues. The need for a punch off the bench was JR's spot to fill, and although there was holes with the mesh of talent on this team, these guys were ridiculously talented and entertaining, while giving JR a pretty good spot to succeed. Again, very similar to New Orleans, they had a huge mess of conflicting personalities and disagreements with the coaching staff in particular. JR's spoken out, taking a lot of blame for the dysfunction on the Hornets, and kind of gives Byron Scott sort of a pass. But George Karl definitely doesn't get the same treatment. Literally, up to this day, the players and Karl continue to take shots at each other for whatever mix of issues they had. Although I and seemingly most people agree that George Karl taking shots at the personal issues of his former players is an incredibly bad taste, they did have some issues on and off the court that it's very hard to look past. Things like the brawl against the Knicks and a fight outside of a Denver nightclub wasn't a very good look, even if that foul was kind of dirty. But revolving on offense around two guys, kind of known as chuckers, who don't really play very good defense, then subbing in JR, who was kind of known as a chucker who didn't play very good defense, was not the best consistent form of offense and overall basketball. This is illustrated by a gentleman's sweep in the first round, on the back of a pretty miserable performance from Smith and Allen Iverson. JR basically became known as a very entertaining yet inconsistent talent that kind of went a little too hard with his off-the-court antics, but after this season, JR would find himself in an issue that was way darker than JR being JR. June 9th, 2007 marked the darkest day in JR's life. Up to this point, JR likely had a bit of an ego. As someone in his position, you don't exactly play by the same rules, and over the last couple years had racked up 27 points against his license in traffic-related issues. And while driving 30 over in a 35-mile-per-hour zone, Smith collided with another vehicle, causing his SUV to flip and leaving him with minor injuries, while his friend Andre Bell suffered severe head trauma. After being rushed to the hospital, Bell was pronounced dead 2 days later at 21 years old. JR was later sentenced to a reduced 30 days in jail from his initial 90-day sentence with 500 hours of community service. With a felony vehicular manslaughter charge of his friend on his plate, it's hard to not feel bad for all parties involved. A family destroyed, a kid who lost his life, and a very talented yet confused young man who likely was in complete mental disarray. Of course, the short suspension from NBA play and correctional actions lack in weight to the trauma that comes from an issue like this. Though everything that's going to come your way from a mess like this, all you can really do is put your head down and keep going. As upon his return to the basketball courts, JR's game was developing to the point that he was finding himself as one of the best six men in the league, at a time that definitely saw some of the best six men of all time. JR was working his way up a bit, embracing his role as a full-time spark plug off the bench. A 40% three-ball guy, a huge threat in the open court, and a catch-and-shoot guy who could knock down anything, contested or not, he played a crucial role on the Nuggets as probably the third best offensive option. His efficient play continued into the playoffs as during a 4-0 sweep to the Lakers, JR was the only one not greatly slowed down by the Lakers' defense. Denver started to embrace the JR show a bit more, pulling 12 shots a game and putting up 15 on really solid shooting, especially when half your shots are from deep. He made a big impact on this team and made a real splash around the league, finishing second in Sixth Man of the Year voting and being a dunk contest participant while being one of the best shooters in the NBA, been one of the most entertaining talents on one of the most entertaining teams. And after the crucial addition of Chauncey Billups, who always escalated team success, this was the best Denver team of this era, finishing 54-28, stomping all the way to the conference finals. After torching the Hornets and lighting up the Dallas Mavericks, JR kind of shit the bed against the Lakers, partly due to the inferior coaching schemes and mostly due to the nature of a guy like JR. He was certainly one of the best role players in the NBA, but he was the combination of two extremes. He still kind of plays defense like he's stoned, getting burned and cooked pretty much all the time, and when you're putting up some of the craziest shots in the NBA, you're not going to be a consistent player. He's a phenomenal spot-up guy, but he's not running off screens and creating space like Ray Allen. He's standing there and shooting it if you're in his face or not. Sometimes it goes in and he can ignite your bench unit, and sometimes he kills your team's momentum and acts like a complete nuisance. That's just kind of the territory that you're in. Over the next 2 years, it was a similar story, serving as sometimes the best sixth man in history and sometimes a JV player. Overall, JR and the Nuggets plateaued, only getting past the first round in this one season. After Karl and Smith grew very sick of each other, I'm assuming, and Denver's time running out, JR departed to China for the NBA lockout. During this time, he put up stupid averages and chucked up pretty much every shot, while faking injuries and skipping practices in the meantime, eventually suing the team for withholding his pay for these reasons. This didn't really amount to anything, but it's kind of funny, I guess. But what did amount to something was his signing with the New York Knicks. Following Carmelo to the Big Apple after some contract issues with the CBA led to legitimate prime JR. After the shortened lockout season, JR came out getting buckets at 18 a game on 42 and 36 splits, finishing with a Sixth Man of the Year performance and a total playoff collapse. He was kind of the exact same player, just given more volume. At a career-high 15 shot attempts, he was an inconsistent guy who put up pretty good averages from either incredibly good or incredibly bad scoring performances that kind of just balanced out. His entertaining as hell play started to cement himself as a fan favorite, and his goofy off-the-court issues started the meme machine. From posting scandalous pictures with his then girlfriend, the infamous "you want the pipe" text, suspensions from smoking dank, and enjoying up the NYC nightlife, he was certainly one of a kind at this time. The Knicks fell apart pretty quickly after their 2013 campaign, and JR's stats actually took a dip as well. He may have been a favorite at the time, but I don't know how seriously he was actually taken as a valuable piece on a winning basketball team. A guy who will more than likely disappear a night or two a week makes it pretty hard to truly serve as a valuable role player. After playing in pretty unorganized offenses through the entirety of his career up to this point, JR would be considered a throw-in to the Cavaliers in what was likely the best thing to happen to his career. In the LeBron James offense, JR's role was completely shifted. And this is really when playing winning basketball actually clicked in his mind. Starting at the two guard with three go-to options before him, you spot up, make a cut here and there, and you play some defense. He wasn't creating shots off the bench anymore, since LeBron and Kyrie's ISOs were way more effective than a guy who really couldn't dribble with his left hand. Putting up 12 a game in 2015 on 39% from deep was pretty pivotal in their success, and even saw him playing his best defense of his career, even though he was on the back nine of his NBA run. After a toughly fought loss to Golden State in the NBA Finals, JR came back and played a crucial role in the revenge tour and the infamous 3-1 comeback, shooting 43% from deep in the playoffs, putting up 12 a game with some humongous shots in the meantime. The comeback really may not have happened without the extra punch in the best playoff run of his very interesting career. After the Warriors broke the balance of the league, JR would slow down as he aged on a declining and outmatched team despite making a couple more finals appearances. With some of the most boring final series I've ever seen, JR spiced it up with the biggest blunder in finals history. With a play that likely did pretty little to disrupt the result of the series, JR would go full-on meme mode as the perfect guy to laugh at for slipping up on the biggest stage. The fun and jokes really weren't fun and jokes to him, and likely the rest of the league. After this point, JR would struggle to find a role in the NBA after being waived by the Cavs the next year. With a quick mistake being blasted across literal mainstream news, JR kind of fell into the abyss and said he was in a pretty dark place from the issue, struggling to find a spot other than the bubble Lakers in which his role was very minimal. After a disappointing end to a very memorable NBA career, JR seems to have bounced back a bit with his life, now finding success as a student athlete. Although he likely would have rather been playing a different sport at this point in his life, and the finish to his career was a bit ugly, his basketball run was nothing to scoff at. It may not have been what it could have been for a player of his level, but JR legitimately went down as one of the best shooters and best spark plugs in NBA history. His entertaining antics on and off the court kept everyone glued to the JR saga, and for better or for worse, he was one of the most talked about names throughout the decade. There's plenty of forces that will come into the league, some more and some less talented than JR. But one thing's for sure, no one will ever do it like the Henny got again.